we're back for another edition of the old man. Been working on a lot of different names for the podcast. So I think so far I feel like Dogbo is the best one. But there was like a new one that Sam had mentioned. And it's just because I have been doing the C.S. Lewis stuff, which is a little more challenging for me. And so I just feel like I've been getting like a real good workout mentally. Yeah, so she called it a brain sled, which, I love hitting the sled at the gym is one of my favorite workouts. And I can like max out at probably like, no, I'm just kidding. But I can, that's what got my knees back into shape. So, love the sled, and definitely that's what it feels like. That feels like I've been pushing this brain sled lately. And so when I've been tired, it's at night, it's not because of, a little bit of it is the physical stuff, the training that I'm doing, but lately mostly it's just been mentally tired. I'm just ready to kaput. So last night for fun, my brother had recommended that I watch the Stutz documentary with Jonah Hill and his therapist, and Mr. Phil Stutz, and it was a great documentary. It was short and sweet. I have a feeling it could have been longer. I feel like they did a good job of telling us why we were only getting what we were getting. In that sense, they kept it honest. But I also feel like they just, they probably had I don't know. For some reason, I feel like they could have gone deeper, and maybe they didn't, or they just didn't want to show the stuff that they did, that they did get that was a little bit deeper. But all in all, what a great documentary. And, the point of the documentary was to go through some of the tools that Jonah Hill's therapist had kind of been teaching Jonah, and that had been proven useful to Jonah. And so Jonah wanted to make a documentary about, his therapist. So I just watched it last night, and I took some notes. And so the first thing, they get right into it. So a tool or an action or a tool can change your inner state. I got a monkey here. All right, he shut the door. Okay. Sorry, we got a monkey that lives in the house. Anyways, where was I at? Okay, yeah. So a tool can change your inner state. So, I know lots of different. This is just going to be another psychological practice, and like these different exercises, mental exercises, and kind of way of, trains of thought, or formulaic kind of trains of thought that can help you cope with some of the mental issues that we all experience from time to time, whether it's anxiety, depression, or fear. And what I really liked about Phil Stutz was that he had this idea when it came to helping people. Like I think traditionally most psychiatrists, they kind of hold a space to allow you to kind of get where you want to go, and they try to like stay as much of a fly on the wall as possible, and not in a negligent way, but just in a kind of I would imagine a guiding kind of way, in a way also to kind of get you to, do the work on your own. But they are there spotting you. I've only done, it was kind of like an anger management thing I had to do with my mom in high school. And I don't I remember doing like one or two sessions by myself and maybe one or two with the counselor and my mom. And then we were kind of good after that. But what was so weird is, we talked a lot about our relationship and what each of us needed to do. And I'll never forget, because my mom always wanted me to say, I love you on the way out of the house, on the way to school. And I had gotten in the habit of just like, I just wanted to get out of the house. I had like a long drive to school. It was early in the morning. I wasn't excited. I didn't have the like, bye mom, I love you. And school was like really, it was stressful for me, but I didn't process it as stressful. Because I definitely was having a good time and everything, but like looking back, it was definitely, school was super challenging, and especially high school got more challenging. And so, I mean, like it does for all of us, right? Everyone's hormones are going crazy, and we're starting to discover our independence, and we're filled with all this, we're being equipped to go out into the world. And so we're like, okay, already, just let us go out into the world, Anyway, so yeah, and just channeling my warrior mentality, that was, senior year was a good test, like, a good test of faith. And it like broke me down in a way that, I don't know, it seemed like early for my age, but I appreciated it. Yeah. And so it exposed like my weaknesses, and it was like God was shining a light on the things that I needed to work on super early. And anyways, but part of that journey, I guess, was therapy with mom. But my point is that, yeah, I wasn't excited to go to high school or go to school in the mornings. And it was like 3 weeks or so after we had our last therapy session, and I just had noticed, like, it was like one morning I woke up and I was like, whoa. It was like a couple weeks maybe, and it was like, Mom, last couple weeks have been chill. And it like hit me in an instant. Like, it literally, I think, took me less than 2-3 seconds to realize that Mom had done something different, and it had been 2 weeks, and therefore the feeling in the air officially changed between us. And it like hit me as I'm like walking out the door. And then I remember just being like, bye mom, love you. And then from then on, I felt it. I wanted to tell my mom that I loved her before I left. And it was really crazy because I was like, whoa, basically I recognized like she's been doing some of the work. And I think that's what every kid thinks is like every kid's biggest challenge. And it's what's so tough about growing up is like even me looking up to people, like people who are in their 60s, like, oh, they've got it figured out, or, oh, this is like a real honor to be working with them. Some people that feeling stays kind of tried and true. Some people you realize, ooh, wait a second, this person has their strengths, but if older people are missing something and the younger person can help keep them accountable, and there's no window or shot for the younger person to help keep that older person accountable, it's like hard to teach an old dog new tricks, but especially when it's learning it from a young pup kind of a thing. It's like it's tough in those situations as the younger person to know what to do. Because one of these ideals that we all run off of is, you're older than me, you're supposed to be wiser than me. So, yeah, when I saw my mom doing the work first, everything felt like it was almost like the natural progression. It was like, oh, okay, well, my mom did something, now I'm supposed to do something. And in a marriage, I think that's the role of the man, is like, you are the one to always do the thing. That's the responsibility you have. You can't take responsibility for your wife. You can't take responsibility for the things that she's supposed to be responsible for, her own feelings and this and that. And so, but we are supposed to be the example on what it looks like to be willing to do, to lay the first, brick of, and that's why, men are so eager naturally to just problem solve, because we already know that. But it's all in how men and women, like how you share what strength looks like, because some women can be turned off by a certain level of strength that a man has. And because the strength I have as a man is one of the greatest powers I have, and it ties into that warrior mentality, I have to be extra careful with it. And because I utilized it in like one of the most physically expressive ways, as far as like standing up for other people, or standing up for myself, or just even being athletically and horseplay minded as a kid, and just really enjoying wrestling and getting into slap boxing and getting, like all these kind of high pressure or high risk situations where you're fighting against potential pain, killer instinct type stuff. And yeah, it's been the craziest thing for me to, one, as a Christian, do it, two, as an artist, and then two, as a man living in the times that I'm living in. So a lot of times I think, if I was like a Viking or a pirate, or, in the 1800s, or, Braveheart, or so, it's like, I feel like I almost would fit in better to a society like that than the one that I'm in now. But I'm grateful to be in this one. And it's just taken me a lot of research to kind of configure what is the right kind of masculine. And a lot of that has to do with staying true to yourself as well, staying true to what God has given you. And so I'm learning more and more. Again, because I just thought I really undervalued it. I really demonized it way before culture did. I mean, way before culture did. Like my whole life, because it was such a heavy, it was like it was a double-edged sword that was heavy. And I'm just this like, I'm teaching myself how to wield it, but no thanks necessarily to the grand scheme and culture, maybe, and thanks to my parents and like playing sports. And so like being on a team and being with other boys that had this in them to some degree. But I was always in the most intense category of guys who had it. I always understood the other guys who were super intense and had it. And it was never comfortable. It was the most uncomfortable thing all the time. And it just added fuel to the fire, the discomfort. Because you were just like, but then there was, again, there is a connection to power in that state of mind. So there's a part of you that's uncomfortable, but there's also a part of you that feels like you're gaining some level of power through that uncomfortability, which is true to life in so many ways. So yeah, but I mean, I haven't done, a lot of the therapy that I do, or a lot of it literally, if I had to make a mechanism and systematize it or draw a picture or something, for me, it's holding all thoughts captive to Christ. Now, before I knew, I didn't hear the verse "hold all thoughts captive to Christ" till I was maybe 36. But in the ways that in my prayer life, as far as, again, thanking God for the trials and tribulations in my life, if you can do that one thing, if you can thank God, yes, the God that loves you and created you. So if you can thank him for all the trials in your life, all the hurdles, all the pain, I don't think you're going to need therapy. You and God do the work together. But it is a diligent, like, that's why starting young is the best, because it's easiest to go full tilt. The level of doubt for a young person who believes in God is very little. And so it's almost like when we look at like infants, we're like, man, what can they see? Can they see like a realm that we can't? And it's like, yeah, that's how in touch, right, we feel like babies and kids are. So like, yeah, when you're a 3, a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old and you've believed in Jesus and that he loves you, and that the whole time you're believing that you're here for a reason, and it's because God loves you. And you experience that in your family and in your community. And even in your community, I mean, like, even in church, I experienced ungodly things. I saw ungodly behavior. It wasn't like, you guys hear my laundry going? Hold on real quick. Let me see if I could lower that. Yeah, sorry about the laundry in the background, but it's Saturday and this is kind of an impromptu podcast here. So, but anyways, man, that is loud though. I'm going to stop it actually. If it wasn't so overcast out right now and so chill, I wanted to make a joke like I was mad at Sam for the laundry. What was I saying? Oh yeah, growing up in the church, you would still see the bad part of people. It might have been worked out a little different than other places. But also, like, there were a few times where, like, grown men would share their hearts with me like when I was a young teenager, and they just like dump all this stuff on me. And I always just felt like I knew where they were coming from, because they were on the consequential side of whatever actions they had made in their life, and they were older men. And so they were just telling me what they had learned, and it had all kind of, obviously it brought them to a church. So it was like they were resonating that off of the Bible, and it all, and I could even do that too. I could see how everything that they were talking about fit in line with what I was being taught. I just really still needed to go and learn. It would have been nice if I could have learned from them, but I definitely still needed to go and learn on my own. But yeah, and it was interesting because this guy, Dr. Phil Stutz, talked about how randomly a couple of guys when he was younger just like poured their hearts out to him, and he was kind of like, I don't know what makes that happen, and I can relate, because they were definitely like strong moments. Like, I felt like I was being trained to deal with this kind of thing. I thought, oh, okay, this, like, to me, it made sense. But it really only made sense through, like, the lens of God. Me growing up in this, like, kind of, we're a relationship with Jesus, and God was being fostered. And so it was through that lens that I could see God using these instances with these men to train me. But I really liked Phil Stutz, and my point again is thanking God for your trials, right? That's the first. If you can, everything that happens in your life, if you can, especially the painful and bad things, just say, hey, thank you, God. I don't know why it's happening, but thank you. That doesn't mean it's not gonna hurt. It doesn't mean there isn't still more work to do. That's just the starting point, at least for me, when I'm trying to surrender again what I was saying in the last podcast. Like the price of living is how you manage the fact that good and bad stuff is happening to us all the time. Chapter 2 of the book, chapter 1 of the book is keep things in the light. Chapter 2 of the book is things are never as good as they seem. Things are never as bad as they seem. So one of the things that Jonah Hill says here in the beginning is, well, okay, let me slow down. What I'm proposing is that all these psychological tools can be distilled into biblical teachings. And they're so simply stated as a biblical teaching that the biblical instruction will always be the most simplified version. Now, there are all these other tricks of focusing on mechanisms of things and processes, which are all tools in and of themselves, but they are not the things in which reality is grounded in. Reality, from the biblical point of view, is grounded in an uncreated God. Basically, the uncreated God the Father creates through God the Son and in God the Holy Spirit. And that is how every bit of reality is grounded in that. And that this God, this triune God, is outside of time, space, and matter, is outside of creation. The uncreated God. Yeah, so when you thank God for your trials and tribulations, you can't conceive of a power greater than God. No human has been able to do that. You can't argue for that because language is already established. We already came up with a word for this powerful source in creation, gods. So what I love though is I love that these tools do exist for people. They're mercy tools that God has given us, right? But if we're not careful, any of these mercy tools, I don't care if it's a therapeutic practice, some spiritual practice, as far as like it's a more of like a breath work thing, or psychedelics. Whatever these tools are to help us have a shift in openness, they're not to be worshipped themselves. Just like we're not supposed to be worshipped ourselves. But this is what Jonah Hill says. He says, tools change your mood and give you a sense of hope that won't be your mood forever. So we get psychologically and emotionally trapped. And thanking God for your trials and tribulations is, again, that's how I would word holding all thoughts captive to Christ in a way. Like, that's how I would have, that's kind of how, that was the mechanism that I was using before I learned about holding all thoughts captive to Christ. But it's the same thing. I mean, I was doing this for a long time without knowing what I was doing, because it just intuitively felt right when I had bad feelings and thoughts about anything, whether it was like losing someone or my own health or like stressing about my own career. I just would tell God, and it's not like the easiest thing to do, but it is also super easy. I just would be like, dear God, thank you for our relationship. Thank you for what you have given me. And literally, you're going to see that all these tools and tricks are like a psychological way to do that, to manifest gratitude. But to do that, they're going to focus on the process. They're going to focus on the process of manifesting gratitude. So you focus on the mechanism, and that's going to be a sure shot that you get out of there. And so it, again, I can see how this is like an incredibly helpful tool. And even if we, even in this case where it's the same thing with weed, right? Like if you're a Christian smoking weed, you better not be saying, oh my God, I love weed. I love weed. Weed, I don't know what I would do without weed. Even if you feel that way, all of those thoughts need to be redirected to God, where you go, oh my God, what would I do without God? Because guess what? Any tool that is here to help you navigate your time here on earth has been given to us by God. All of the mechanisms. Now we need to go to God's word to figure out, are there certain mechanisms we should just be avoiding altogether? Again, what we are learning is that the enemy loves to get us to focus on the mechanisms and somehow get us confused on, what would it be? Yeah, the devil tries to get us to focus on the mechanism, to draw our attention to the mechanism only. So your salvation is in the amount of psychedelics you do. Your salvation is in hitting the gym every day. They're not the tools are God gave. God's not mad you're going to the gym every day. God's asking you to count only on him. And so if the gym, even though it is an integral part of your day, you have to be able to envision yourself being able to live a life where you can't go to the gym every day and still be happy, because God loves you and he made you, and he alone can get you through whatever situation you're in. He can give you the peace to look death in the face with the open arms that Jesus did on the cross, right? I mean, it's like, it's incredible. Anyways, so tools change your mood and then just give you a sense of hope that won't be your mood forever, right? Okay. Yeah, so again, this idea that we get emotionally stuck. We get stuck in, it's like you make a new post on social media, and then it's like within like a minute or within 5 minutes, you check social media way too many times to see if anyone or how many people have liked your post. Like there's a little sputtering out right there that's happening. And yeah, I think we get like that emotionally, right? Like we're like, wait a second. No one's approved this idea in my head. No one's approved this part of me. I haven't approved it, yeah. And so we sputter out emotionally. We get stuck emotionally because we're just like, but I need, like, no one's liked this yet. And I don't even know if I like this, or, yeah, it's a scary thought to think that you're going to be in a certain mood forever. And isn't this why people think, Christians and religious people are so weak? Because it's like, they need something. It's crazy to me that, like, I guess they need something just like I need something, or maybe they don't even make that connection. They're like, they just need something while they're like drinking and smoking and, just coping with however they, or even while they're just like, they're a freak at the gym every day, who is like very little relationship with other people because their whole world is just working out at the gym. And I totally agree with what he says in this, like, that being, getting a hold, like, and this is stuff that my dad and I have talked about. Like, if you're looking to get your life together, getting in shape is like physically is definitely one of the easier things to kind of jumpstart. But as far as these real-time visual exercises, he started kind of thinking in visual terms. Well, he always has. And so he would draw these cards up. This is the therapist. He would so he started using these cards he would draw while people were talking to him. And he says the power of the cards, he found out that it helped to take these big ideas and turn them into simple images. And it just made me think of iconography, obviously memes, but like even what I'm saying, that all of these tools and practices to help us psychologically and emotionally and spiritually, they all fit within the teachings of the Bible. So, and again, sometimes a lot of times we need to bounce these simple ideas off of many different topics, even complex in a complex way, for it to start to make sense, right? Though as a kid, usually when you watch kids movies, this stuff is like in your heart, you feel it while you're watching the movies. And it's completely self-evident and seems like common sense. And like, why would we even struggle with this when we get older? This makes so much sense. And yeah, that's even like if you are because kids are also smart. So if you're learning the Bible in a environment in which the Bible isn't being lived out, it's just being taught, the kid's going to pick up on that real quick, subconsciously, and kind of it's not going to mean the same as if a kid is in an environment where he feels and senses that this is really being lived and that this is true in a way that not only he sees but he feels. And it's got to make sense too in relationship to the world around him. And so that's what I mean. Like in all these almost subconscious ways and in all these complex ways where it's just, reflection, things reflecting off of each other in the way that life is orchestrated. So a kid it's like, it's complex stuff we're talking about, but yet a kid starts to pick up on this in relationship to what he's being taught pretty early on. And that's why the Bible being such a simplified version, right? I forget who said it, but this guy said that everything ever written on ethics is footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount. So the Bible says that treat others how you want to be treated. Love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and lean not on your own understanding. Now, that's super simple, because why? You can say it in a matter of seconds. And that is the kind of reverse engineering. It's like we have to catch up the words that we say and the meaning and the impact. We have to catch up what we're saying to how we're living. And it does, and so many times in our lives, it does not match up. We are not walking the walk, right? And the more you walk the walk, the more you know, that the less you know. But it's kind of weird too, because the less you know, the better sense you kind of have on certain things. There's a certain sense in which we have strength in the idea that we know nothing. But that cannot be the cop-out for not trying to figure out whether truth exists or not, or what truth is, or what is the afterlife? Why are we here? What is this all about? So that he uses these cards to turn these big ideas into simple, images. And in a sense, he felt it was a way more powerful way to communicate. And that kind of ties into the last podcast where C.S. Lewis was talking about a man can accept Christ without knowing how it works, just like a man can get nourishment from food without knowing how it works. It's like, yeah, no wonder images are a more powerful way to communicate than words. And that's the other thing is like there's even a balance within words, right? Like the fact that words can only get us so close to articulating certain experiences. And we still have to go through the way in which I relate to those words and the way in which you relate to those words and the way in which we're relating those words to each other. And we have to cipher through and decode and figure out, are we really saying the same thing? So sometimes it's just easier to see a picture of something and be like, yup. Yeah, actually, everything else that we're going to say is going to kind of somehow muddy up this image. And sometimes, again, that it's not bad for us to, like, we need these simple icons and images because they're loaded with information like a file is, or a folder. So then he says, so a tool is a bridge between what you realize the problem is and the cause of the problem to over here actually gaining at least some control over the symptom. Crazy to thank God for your depression. Again, I have so many, and mostly due to my own actions, right? Mostly due to the recklessness of myself. I caused a lot in my own, and due to my own choices and my own worldview, my own philosophy, my own naivete. All of it is a lot of that is what caused my problems. But I always went back to, okay, God, thank you for, like, from a young age, I always felt God's love. So as I got older in my late 20s and I thought like, okay, maybe, I never thought really God didn't love me, to be honest, because I've always felt him loving me. And I could see it in the way that just what I would put my value in versus what my friends would put their values in. But there was something about God loving me and Jesus living in me and dying for me that has protected me psychologically. But it's also given me all the tools I need, consciously or not, to, continue to grow and not get stuck. And here you are, you're like, oh, all right, I'm depressed. Oh, wait, I'm depressed because I thought success was going to make me happy and I got success and it didn't make me happy. Oh, what's going to make me happy? If I'm asking myself what's going to make me happy, then yeah, I'm probably not happy. And then it's like, okay, so that's the issue. Now, the cause of the problem, okay? The issue is I'm depressed because I was putting my belief system in something that was not reliable, like the external concept of the worldly concept of success. Okay, now that foundation that I built my worldview on crumbles. So it's like, okay, so that was the problem. Now, what was the cause of the problem? All right, well, even in the movie, we see how hard it was, for Jonah. And if Jonah really wanted to be the hero in that movie, he would have opened up even more. And I'm not judging him. I think he did a great job on making that movie. I just think as he evolves, he will kind of look at how he will be once you watch the documentary, you'll know what I'm talking about. But he himself might even be the little turd inside of the pearl, which was that project, right? He might be like, he might look back and say, hey, I could have done that better. But to his point in the documentary, his point is that he will actually, if he is the turd in the pearl of that project, then he will look at that turd and he will form a new pearl around it by learning something from being the turd, right? That's what he said. And great. Now you're cooking, right? Now you're starting to, if Christ can be as perfect as he was and be the greatest teacher that he was and as loving as he was and die on the cross like he did, then we should be able to be grateful for our situations and constantly looking for the lesson in those situations and constantly being able to make something beautiful out of those situations. When these tools work, people are accepting and just stoked about the fact that these tools work, but they're not asking themselves what allows these tools to work at all. Because when they ask themselves that, they're either going to get to the point that all of the work they're doing is meaningful or meaningless. And the only way it's meaningful is if there's a personal mind that created all of this. We know what the problem is, but the cause of the problem is some spiritual hurt, right? That's the spiritual hurt is like the physical and emotional. It's the thing that your spirit is what absorbs the impact you get in every way you can be impacted as a human. Then it is in your spirit. A lot of the trauma or a lot of the work we have to go back and fix, or a lot of the cracks in the foundation, they're at the spiritual level, right? From a biblical worldview, God knew you before he created you, and he knew you while you were being formed in your mom's womb. So you are a spirit at this. He knows you by just your spirit, but he also knows everything about your physical makeup as well. But the cause of the problem, it's going to get put on some traumatic experience. And then the question is going to be like, okay, well, how do you deal with traumatic experiences? How do you justify bad things happening to you? And that is that's the crazy thing about Christ that we were talking about in the last podcast, was that he lives within us and rejuvenates, restores our spirits. Yeah, so the cause of the problem, we're gonna usually in psychiatry, we're gonna go to the solution, and we're going to try to find some way, some tool, some mechanism to get that person to have a shift in openness to the point where they can reconfigure their relationship to that traumatic experience. And you can tweak the outlook you have on why things happen to you a few different ways. You know, you can justify why bad things happen to you a few different ways, but really there's only one that makes like real sense. So if we have to go to a spiritual, basically because it's a battle between spirit and the body, right? So, you know, our flesh, it's that is where the sin comes from, and that's where our sin nature comes from, and that is where the spirit starts to suffer. The spirit starts to suffer because of what the flesh is doing. That would be the real cause of any problem. So we didn't get into it with him. So he's basically saying, okay, so the tool is a bridge between what you realize the problem is and the cause of the problem to over here actually gaining at least some control over the symptoms. That was what I liked about him, right? He said possibility means you feel yourself reacting differently. And what his philosophy on therapy was, instead of patients coming and therapists kind of just like holding space in a very passive way, he kind of wanted to make sure, he wanted to develop some way in which his patients would feel different when they left. And I can't believe that this is what therapy is, if I'm being honest. And I think there's other people out there too, because it's crazy. It's like, what do people do when you go to your therapist and you tell them everything, right? And you don't feel any different. And then you go and you have a conversation with a stranger who just actually cares about you and listens to you. You just feel like you connected, right? And you leave and it's like, you feel better from that experience, but or you feel better from the person holding the door open for you, but you don't feel better when you leave your therapist's office. I don't know if that's something people experience or not, but this concept of people going to therapy and not feeling a difference shocks me. Like I'm in disbelief that people actually are out here experiencing that. I don't deny it. I just, my lack of awareness around therapy it is like what it's supposed to feel like, what it's supposed to do. I mean, what if you're paying someone a tremendous amount of money and the feeling you get from them isn't as good as the feeling you got when the stranger opened the door for you and looked you in the eye and said, "Hey, have a great day." And you felt them, that they really cared. And possibly maybe could they have cared more than the therapist, and you're paying the therapist and you're only, do people think about that? That's gotta feel like it's like, how do you confirm what you're paying your therapist is worth? The juice is worth the squeeze. I mean, it's gotta be, for some people, I don't know. It seems like a challenge, but I feel blessed because I feel like, though again, I'm not saying I don't have any fleshly things, right? Like I still hit my little vape pen, but the vape pen isn't if I leaned on the vape pen, then my dependency would just be increasing. Now, if I know how to use the pen responsibly, there's no way I can do that without me doing the work necessary to be responsible for that. And for me, how I do it responsibly is I have to continue to check myself with God, and I have to continually realize when I cross the line, meaning like I hit the pen too many times. So I'm not saying that there aren't tools that are fleshly that, God gave us wine, right? He gave us the seed-bearing plants. But there is definitely still a code of conduct around those things, which really, again, I think from a spiritual standpoint, it just really has to do with idolizing. But from a psychological standpoint, I think it just has to do with what we're grounding our good choices in, what's justifying the fact that our good choices are really good choices, and what is justifying, again, the fact that bad things happen to us. All right, so then he talks about life force, and it's the first step in getting better. So he talks about the mindset of like people blaming their aimlessness and laziness on no sense of direction. And, I think I said this as far as a cop out, but he essentially said it's a cop out. And you can always work on your life force. And then he says, you basically find out who you are and what your purpose is by activating your life force, because your life force is the only part of you that actually is capable of guiding you when you're lost. Okay. So he's pretty much, life force is your spirit. And yeah, I mean, your spirit is, it's right. Your heart, what is going to guide you through the dark time? What's going to make you arise and become the hero in this situation, right? And that is the spirit you have dictates the way in which you go about that. So he has this pyramid though, and so the bottom of the pyramid is your body. In the center of the pyramid, it's people. And at the top of the pyramid, it's yourself. So these are steps. This is how to activate your life force. You start with body, and you start with non-exercise, you start with exercise and diet and then sleep. And again, I just observed this on my own. And by the time I was like 25, when I spent money I didn't have, when I didn't eat good, and when I bought things I didn't have money to buy, those things all triggered my depression. Now, thankfully, one thing I know I would have added to that is if I was being like if I would have been out there like chasing bitches and having a lot of sex, that would have been another thing that would have definitely been on that list. Or even if I was watching, like I watched porn in my 20s, but not tons and tons. And I definitely felt a line there, though the threshold was more for me back then. Like I could tolerate less porn now than I could in my 20s, but I still didn't, I still even then kind of like would be like, ooh, okay, yeah, this is making me feel bad. And it was kind of, it's funny because it's like the same thing with like pills. It would be like, I'd take, like pain pills or something. I'd take them for like 3 days and I'd be like, okay, yeah, like I can feel my spirit changing. Like the dependency my spirit needs in order to maintain the level of happiness that I know I'd need to take more pills. Right. So I think the other thing I can add to that list is just what I was trying to say is like smoking too much weed, right? That was the other thing that it took me a lot longer to realize what that was doing to me than it should have. I feel like I noticed the not eating right, spending money, and not working out. Yeah. Like those things, like I said, I caught on early. Smoking was on that list, and I should have picked it up a little. Should have noticed a little sooner. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. So, yeah. Okay. So the body is the bottom part of the pyramid, and then people is the middle. So your relationships to others, and he's basically saying to activate your life force through relationships to others, you have to be the one to actually you have to actively take advantage of those relationships in the sense that you have to initiate those relationships. If you think someone's interesting and you want to invite them out to go do something, you have to do that. The top part of the pyramid is your relationship to yourself. Get to know your subconscious. And he just, says writing is a great way. Journaling is a great way. It's like a mirror that reflects our unconscious. Again, if people are already out there partiers, if you guys are already out there partying and you're already taking substances to party and that's like your only intention, switch your intention up with some of that stuff. And instead of Saturday night partying and going out and doing things that you don't want to remember or you can't remember, less is more, and do some reflective work on yourself on Saturday night, whether you are still partaking in those substances or not. It's like baby steps here. And I can only speak from my experience because when I was starting to not look at pornography, it was during a time where I was experimenting with doing blow. And so I would, if I ever was like alone at night and, was being tempted to look at porn or something, I would just, for a long time, I would like maybe just do some kind of a drug and then make music or make art. And then I'd do a line or I'd do a bump, and then it'd be like, okay, I'm going to play guitar. And I'd play guitar for like 5 minutes and it'd be like, this feels terrible. So then that's actually the only thing that would make me feel good in those moments is when I started to study. And it was mostly like religion or philosophy. So then that like kind of that was like how I was dealing with any of those feelings. I was just kind of blocking them out with something that I felt like was going to be more productive in the end, even if it was obviously by a not ideal means. I mean, I shouldn't have been doing that, the blow that is, but and then it's funny because, then I stopped doing blow and Adderall, and it wasn't like the porn came back for me, but the thing that stayed was the studying. And I just praise God for that, because even throughout all that process, even though I was kind of stuck in a bad, you should have called me a bad Christian more than a New Age Christian, but you could have called me a New Age Christian too. Though that's not what I thought I was. I was not trying to be that. I didn't think I was that. I wouldn't have known what that was. I was just being a really ignorant and bad Christian at the time. Nonetheless, I was still routing all these experiences through my relationship with Jesus, though I wasn't reading the Bible yet. It wasn't that I wasn't. I would read the Bible a little bit from time to time, along with all the other texts that I was reading, and I would always be open to listening to people speaking. When I would go, I might even flip the channel late at night and actually stay on one of those TV evangelists and listen to them for a little bit and just see, okay, can I? And always it would be funny because I'd have all these judgmental things about them and how they weren't real, and I could see how phony it was. But then my spirit still, there was still some like vague enough sentences in there that were true that if I'd like separated myself from my judgmental self, I could still feel God's spirit coming through them, because what they were saying was true. And I was not, I wasn't giving them credit. I wasn't even, it was like, yeah, those words are, yeah, I was just able to be moved by the truth of what they were saying, even though there were many aspects of truth that those people probably have been, they have incorrect. And, oh yeah, I was making the point that instead of ruining your subconscious with all the partying and substance abuse, try to do something that's going to get you to understand your subconscious a little bit better. For those of you who aren't doing that, this is not, I'm not telling people who aren't interested in that or who aren't already making choices like that to make choices like that. If your heart is already has got you in the place where you are making choices like that, and you are beginning to research anything about Christ or the Bible or God or truth or anything like that, take some time to reflect on your subconscious. Take some time to reflect on what it is that you truly believe in and why you really believe those things. And the more patient you can be when you're excited in these discoveries, the better. The less you go around and say, Eureka, I figured it out completely. You guys got to do this. You guys got to la, la, la. Like, give yourself some time to process what you're talking about. Give yourself some time to kind of come down, assess, maybe, and again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I don't get it. I'm just saying that some things we think are amazing and amazing moments that we are super excited to have, they come with a lot of responsibility down the road. So sure, you can be excited about it, but if you're ultimately unworthy of being responsible for the experience due to the lack of upkeep and work that it takes, then it can be another thing that brings you like basically back. It can be trauma, basically. But if you're strong enough, if you got enough fight in you and enough spirit in you and enough will to actually seek the truth, then, between that, doing that and going to a rave, or doing that and actually seeking the truth, like I said, I would just give seeking the truth a few, some tries. And that you could write, you could read, but study multiple things so that so that you're giving everything a fair shot, including Jesus. Like, don't give everything else this shot and then not give Jesus the same benefit of the doubt that you're giving everything else when you're studying it. But yeah, I mean, that's another thing, like with the psychedelics for me, is what it did for me and my subconscious was crazy. And I guess that is another way in which I've had therapy, but it was a way different setting and we don't even have to go into that now, but definitely was able to get a deeper understanding about what the subconscious is through a lot of those ceremonies. Increasing your passion and finding out what you're passionate about by connecting to your life force. Yeah, so basically, you get, it's mind, body, and soul. And, you have you have the body, you're exercising, you're eating right, you're getting enough sleep, you got your relationship to people, so you're in the place to reach out to others, which means you have to have something to give. You can't just be taking. So you have to be doing well enough for yourself to accumulate something to give to others. And then it would be the same thing with yourself, right? I mean, it's like you're out here now, you're giving your body time, you're giving other people time, and now you need to give yourself time. So that is how you activate what you're passionate about. You find out what you want to do, and and you get basically you get more energy. So then they bring up what they call part X, which is the part of you which is like the villain in your mind. When adversary comes up, you're going to face this part of yourself, again, part X. And it's the judgmental part of you. It's the antisocial part of you. It's this invisible force that wants to keep you from changing or growing. And it wants to, this is what they said, it wants to F up your shit. It's the voice of impossibility. It makes you feel like you're wasting your time, that, maybe you've invented all this stuff and that's great, but it won't spread deep enough into culture. And you will never be able to get rid of part X. And this is crazy because this is, to me, where I think things get really, really nuanced and subtle, is the difference between, let's just say, what he's calling part X in ourselves, and then also what the enemy does to us. And how do we know the difference between, part X, which is just ourself being hard on ourselves, or the enemy, the devil actually kind of manipulating our thoughts, or getting us, or manipulating us, to think a certain way. And that's where I just think this is so interesting too, because we will never get rid of our sin nature, right? This is also part X. We will never get rid of the part of us that thinks like, oh, that would have been a good, even if we don't even have, like, we could have stole something nice and we're in the store and then we leave or whatever. And it's like, we get in our car and you're like, oh wait, dang, I actually could have stole that thing. You didn't even intend to, you just realized that there was an opportunity that you were like, oh, that's kind of crazy. That was crazy that I could have stole that. Or like someone, it's like, even those thoughts, it's like that we're just so, that is a part of our part X as well. It's not only I don't know, I can't speak for him. That's a part of the enemy. That's a part of our sin nature. But I am kind of assuming that part X and the enemy go hand in hand here. At least, I mean, especially this invisible force that wants to keep you from changing or growing. So this seems more like our sin nature, this invisible force, sin. Yeah, that's constantly getting us to feel like we're wasting our time, or we're not loved, or nobody cares, or everything's impossible. All things are possible through Christ who strengthens you. Yeah, like you can see where, again, this even fits, the Bible has already done a good job of explaining this to us. So learn to love the process of dealing with these three things. And so, so the next thing he talks about how not only does everyone have to deal with part X, everyone has to deal with pain, uncertainty, and constant work. And it's true, because you think, oh, what about people who, what about the 1% who have everything? Well, not only is there work to do to keep up whatever business they have, but there's also the personal work that everyone has to do, regardless of if you work a job every day or not. There's so much work to be done, constant work. So, and this ties into what I was saying last week about the price for living is dealing with all the good and bad, and pain is part of the good and bad. Uncertainty is part of the good and bad, and constant work is part of the good and bad. So these are all areas when you are in pain, you can thank God for that pain, your trial and tribulation, and that gives you more peace and more comfort and more hope. When you are facing uncertainty. You can be certain in the Lord and in God's constant character and his faithfulness, and just the basically the consistency of God. He is reliable for us to put all of our faith in for everything that is uncertain in our lives. And then it's the same thing with constant work. I mean, playing for the audience of one. You can always, who cares what you do? It's how you do it. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I mean that from like a spiritual sense. I mean, like, I'm sure there are people who do great things for humans and made great advancements and for man, who, weren't doing it with all their heart, right? But in God's eyes, we are supposed to be doing everything with all of our hearts. That is part of the implication of there being even a spirit or a life force, right? To begin with, this idea that we do it full-heartedly. So yeah, how we deal and what we make out of all the good and bad things in life, because we have to process all of those things through our bodies and our minds and emotionally. And so then he says the highest creative expression for humans is creating something new in the face of adversity. And then the greater the adversity, the greater the worse the adversity, the greater the opportunity. And I just thought about Christ on the cross. There's no greater adversity, or there's no worse adversity, I should say, for an individual. And there was no greater opportunity for an individual. So, and then the concept of the highest form of creative expression for humans is to create something new in the face of adversity. So Christ was definitely, by defeating death, he created so much new, a new life, a new part of the spiritual kingdom. There was the new covenant, basically, right, in that moment. But it's true, too, for us. That's another way that Christ is the example for us, because he's doing it in these big ways. But really, there is so much value in implementing these things in the small areas in our lives, right? So even though Jesus' suffering on the cross is much worse than your suffering at your job, it is still he's still an example of the heart and spirit it takes to suffer, to make a sacrifice, to suffer for sacrifice. And again, we're supposed to sacrifice our lives. So all of the fleshly things, these fleshly desires that cause us the depression and the anxiety and everything that sends us to the therapist in the first place, those are all sinful fleshly desires. So the way Christ showed us how to surrender with meaning and with purpose, on the cross, that's exactly, he modeled to us what it looks like we're supposed to do. And what's crazy is we live in this world right now where God really called us to do that to the point to where we would want to create more of us. And it's crazy that we're doing such a poor job that so many people now are talking about not having kids, because maybe it's for the environment. Maybe it's because they're scared or of finances. Maybe it's because they just think they want to travel and, like they're limited on options if they do have kids. And it's just crazy to me because it's like, really, that's what we're supposed to be having so much fun that we want more people here at the party. We're not supposed to be so paranoid that things are going to go terribly wrong that we don't create life. Anyways, and if we're all, why not gear up for death if that's ultimately all there is? So it's just, to me, it shows the state. It shows kind of like the state of mind of the spiritual state of mind of a bunch of us here on this planet. So one thing he said that was cute, that I liked, is stay grounded and reach for the stars. And then he says two people can create a field, right? So as far as a connection, where you can paint an emotional landscape with someone, right? You can foster the environment, the vibe, and where two or more are gathered, there is God. So that's kind of what I got from that, as far as just them, two people can create a field, right? And that field it's an invisible field, and it's also like ran off. You're creating this field, and that's part of the consequence of the execution phase of what your intentions are going to be this field and connection between you guys. So then he brings up this concept of the string of pearls. And it's just basically, like I am the person who puts the next string on the pearl. So this is kind of a way of looking at your life's work in like some sort of a image for your life's work, because you have all the things you've done, and not only your life's work, but just your timeline for your life is a string of pearls. And you have all these events and achievements and creations and all these different things, and it's like the new pearl you're stringing on. And he says that in the center of every pearl is a turd, and it's just reminding you that there was something imperfect about the process of stringing that pearl, but that basically there is no such thing as perfect. And again, that is why we needed the perfect penitent for our sins and even for the world, because if nothing truly was perfect, then yeah, sure. Then there's no hope if nothing's perfect. If there wasn't one perfect thing in the universe, then, I think there would be no resolution, because we would literally just be like drilling oil and then it all going into the ocean. And we're like, oh, dang, we didn't mean to do that. I mean, because that's all we ever do. We go out in space and then blow up we accidentally blow up something, a planet, and then it starts coming at us to Earth, and then we, whatever. It's like, if you just keep giving us time, we're just going to keep learning from our mistakes. So we needed someone who was actually perfect to ground the fact that we need mistakes. If nothing grounded the fact that we made mistakes and we needed to learn from mistakes, this would just be sheer chaos. But there is this concept that through our mistakes, somehow we're evolving to true good and true, we get better at pipelines if we're using oil. Because it does matter that the oil is going into the ocean. Yeah, if there's nothing out there that is truly perfect, then then there's no perfect ending to this. That's for sure. Let's see. Next thing they talk about is the shadow, and he talks about being in sync with the shadow. So to figure out who your shadow is, you close your eyes and then you envision the version of yourself that you want to hide from others or you're most ashamed of. I'm trying really hard to figure out, like, even when it happened, for Jonah, he was really overweight. So when he was 13, 14, it's like there's a specific time and place for him that his shadow is at this moment. For me, I don't think it's necessarily like a time and place thing. It's just certain characteristics of my sin nature. It would be like lust of the eyes, like boastful pride of life type things. It would be like, my shadow is the parts of me that as a Christian are like the almost like the sin parts of me that I'm really trying to work on. And so, yeah, I mean, like, another thing, what else would be ashamed of that I'm trying to hide? Yeah, that was the other thing, is like, a lot of times, especially with the whole humble bumble thing, it's like I've tried to play it off like I don't struggle with like vanity and these thoughts. But the reality is that I struggled with them so much because it wasn't because I wanted to. It was like the input, the imprint, and the input I was getting from the external world was about my looks. And I had this real opportunity to conform to that and base my life around those interactions or not. And so I chose not to, but that doesn't mean that I don't still like a thing, I'm like a shadow part of me that I'm ashamed of, is it's like, part of me thinks, what if I would have stayed in Hollywood and used those looks? And I only went on one modeling audition and I got it. And it's like, what if I would have stayed and done more? And it's like, there's this, I'm ashamed of that part of me, the part of me that wants to use my looks to my advantage, like on the nose, in the sense, like I don't care if I'm not talking about just like, oh, people liking your vibe or liking I mean like me promoting myself as a face, as like, hey, this is what I see is important about me, is I'm the good looking guy. That for, that is the fact that I go anywhere near there in my head is my shadow. That's a big part of my shadow. I rather people just think I don't have those thoughts. Oh no, he's just chilling. So let's see. And of course your shadow changes throughout your life, you know. I think for Dr. Stutz, he was saying like his shadow is kind of like, what was the word he used? It was like, oh man, decrepit. He didn't say decrepit, but that's what I'm going to say. It's kind of like, you know, kind of mangled and roughed up. But, I think my shadow just looks like me. My shadow maybe like looks like me before I ever had a beard, and I like before I grew my hair long, and I like it was like faux hawk, and I don't know. I think my shadow is more. It would be like a more attractive, like me, if I put the emphasis on the focus on how attractive I could be. That would be kind of what my shadow would look like. And it's embarrassing because it's like, what's embarrassing is I really don't care how attractive I am. I think attraction comes in so many different ways. I mean, this is part of the reason why I think it was easier for me to not care about it. But like, yeah, like the fact that I want to not care about it, but I still do. And the fact that I chose to not focus on it through my 20s and 30s. And then now I'm pushing 40 and I'm starting to wonder if I made the right choice. Even that thought kills me. I want to like, that's the shadow, dude. I want to like, I'll slit that Mark's throat. You know, I want to slit that throat, the throat of that thought. And I have thoughts like that far too often, you know, like, it's just like, that's not who I'm trying to be. And, anyways, but, I think, yeah, I mean, I think I wonder what else is, now that I'm thinking about it. Because like I said, it's not a time period me. It's just things about me that I just go, oof. And I think this thing that just spins out in me that wants to, I think my shadow thinks too hard too. So yeah, when I'm overthinking things, that can be my shadow. Let's see. How do you feel? Oh, wait. Okay. So now this is the exercise. Okay. So now you think of your shadow. Okay. Now, how do you feel about you, how you treated and dealt with him? Okay. All right. So, you know, how do I feel that I have treated and dealt with my shadow? Just kidding. I think, I do really want to think about it though. I mean, I definitely treated him like I was embarrassed of him. You know, I definitely discredited any kind of credit whatsoever that was being directed in that way. I demonized myself. You know, I just thought, nah, that is not what God would want me to do. And It's funny. I'm going to screw this exercise up, but it's like, it's like, and then how does he feel about that? And it's like, really, those parts of me don't give a fuck. Like the part of me that just cares about how attractive I am isn't over there being hurt about the fact that I don't care if I'm attractive or not. It is just, it either wants to be seen as attractive or it doesn't. I don't know. That's how I feel. I hope I'm not screwing this up because I'm really trying hard to do this. But how do you feel about how you treated and dealt with him? What other parts of my? I think the other part of my shadow is the try hard part of me. The part of me can be like overly gooey or thoughtful or like want to have like almost kind of like a sensationally, like a sensationalist. I just want to have this great feeling moment. Man, I don't know, dude. I don't know how. I don't know. I mean, I guess why I'm having a trouble with this is I feel pretty in sync with my shadow. And I just did so much work with that stuff over the years and in my late 20s and early 30s. And it's crazy because I'll play it at the end of the podcast, but I wrote a song called Black Cloud, I think in like 2016 or something. And it was that was when I was dealing with a lot of my depression. And I kind of like knew I guess I didn't know what it was, but I was like becoming familiar with it enough to start to write about it musically and to start like conceptually thinking like what is going on here. And anyways, but so there's a song I wrote called Black Cloud, which is all about this stuff. And it talks about, becoming one. I forget something about becoming one with my shadow, but in a nutshell, I was starting to get in sync with this part of me. So the thing about Jesus is that he knows our shadows and how broken we are. And he knows that we have this sin nature and we can't get out of it. And it's so beneficial to be running my logic and reasoning through Christ's love for me regardless. And my parent, and then being able to feel my parents doing the same thing about me with their love for me. They love me regardless. So, like the shadow work for me is, it might even be just more of a superficial thing than some of the deep rooted things. But Jesus, I'm constantly having to take the selfish things to Jesus and kill those parts of me. And I think the more I kill all those fleshly parts of me, I think the less the shadow, the less I care it's there, because it's the same thing with sin. Like this force is going to be there. Like if you stop practicing not sinning, you would be able to sin and sin and sin. Like right now, it's like I can't even take a little hit of weed out of a pipe. And if I did, I might even feel like, some spiritual presence it might even feel slightly dark for me. Like maybe some spirits were around that I didn't necessarily want to be around. That does not mean that I could not build up my tolerance for smoking again. And that doesn't mean that I can't slowly introduce smoking more and more and more. And then all of a sudden, what used to kind of make me feel weird, like now I can smoke, I'd have to smoke like 2 blunts. And if I did that, then I might feel this presence again. So your sin nature, you can always it's always waiting for us to reactivate it or to fall into it, just like our shadow is. And just like part X is. Okay, but it is interesting that part X and the shadow are 2 different things. So the shadow is what you're ashamed of and you're hiding from, and part X is just like the shit talking judgmental part of you. Okay, so then what can you do to make up for the fact that you didn't pay any attention to him for such a long time? I don't know, man. Like, to be honest, this sounds so dumb, but it's just like, oh God, I don't know. What can you do to make up the fact that you didn't pay him? No, they were parts of me that I didn't want to pay attention to. Like there were qualities about myself that I don't admire in other people. It's not that I don't think that they don't hold their place, but ultimately I think the value, it's like, I mean, at this point, it might as well be cryptocurrency. No one knows what to do with it. Some people got a lot of it and play it and invest a lot of it, and some people really just don't care. And it's only my sin nature that gets me to really, really care. It's the spiritual part of me, and it's my relationship with God that gets me to focus on what really matters, which none of that stuff really matters. Now, if you are deciding to use that as a tool in your life and for a career or just as a power play or a way to connect, I'm not saying that it's wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that it can be a nice gate. It can be a nice key, but it's never going to be like, if you're making that what defines you, then there's just a lot of foundational work you'll have to do, right? But if you're using that as just a key in order to kind of get you to the next step in two places, and you're doing that in a godly way, there's nothing anyone can say about it. No, not everyone has to sit there and say, hey, part of it for me was because had I said yes to that part of me, I think I would have opened myself up to more fleshly activity, with other, like, as dumb as it sounds, but I just feel like it would have taken me, I would have made more mistakes as well. I just feel like that in the same way that I feel like if I would have found success earlier, it would have been more because of the way I looked, and that would have programmed me in a certain way that I don't know if that would have been healthy or if I really would have wanted it. So yeah, I mean, like, for me, the shadow thing, I mean, I think I don't think this is a bad thing. I mean, I think there's people who could really resonate with this thing, but I don't think I'm at a place right now where it feels like it's doing anything great for me. I do think, though, I do think he has a point here when he's talking about actually what can you do to make up for the fact that you didn't pay attention to him and everything. Yeah, now that I think about it, I have been allowing myself to make more thoughts on whether I feel like I'm attractive or not, so instead of just being like Charles Manson vibes with the super long hair and long beard, I've allowed myself to kind of clean up my look and be more presentable, only because it feels good to me now. So I'm not saying that, that's wrong. I'm just saying that there was a part of, I did start to feel like I was neglecting a little bit too. So I think that may be another reason why I'm struggling with this shadow thing, because I do feel like I've actually been able to give that part of me a little bit more attention instead of it just being like 100% neglect. And I think a part of that has just come naturally with going back to the gym for the last, couple years now. And, it's just crazy. That is really funny. I'm not going to lie, especially after being someone that didn't look in the mirror and then now going to a gym and working out in front of a mirror again. It's just, and then even as many tattoos as I got last year, just like there is a part of me that has totally reopened the vain part of me of like, who am I aesthetically? Who do I want to present myself to be? And I do feel like I've actually allowed myself to care for that part of me a little more. At least for me, I'm feeling called to just continue to not put appearance too high up on my priority list. I just feel that from a conviction standpoint. Also, my dad, who I look up to so much, I've talked about before, he did not care. He had the coolest style ever, and it was the I don't give an F style. It was just like, in his attitude, he was like this schluppy son, schluppy dressed dude, but like his countenance and his vibe just beamed and beams wherever he goes. And so I just always thought, like, I could so clearly see how everything that society was telling me about looks and first impressions and everything, it like meant so little. And even though it does have its place, the concept of a first impression, sure, but man, it's like if you're only living life based on first impressions, you're getting ripped off. And he was always such a good example of that. So yeah, so okay, let's see here. Okay, well, I'm going to take a break because we're almost reaching 2 hours here, and then I got, let me see, yeah, I got a few more pages of little notes here, so we'll keep at it. Okay, I'll be back in a little bit.
Fingerprints turn into trenches. The older I get, I miss the stench